Everyone, and welcome to our Group A match between Cubit32 and Gameslayer989. So, I am Blues. We're here with a power colony and double power price. That's going to be important to watch out for right away. I'm going to be looking for players to really look at something like this. Really strong robotic location. Water will be difficult there, but ice isn't too far away. You can sort of make that work. Carbon's also difficult. Maybe you want to look at the robot over here instead. Good combo tiles still. Some access to uranium. Uranium for the nuclear plant's going to be very critical. Or maybe someone really just wants the scavenger. High carbon starting price, this gets you off to a very quick start. I think I still do prefer the robot, and there it is. Not sure I'd go for that combination of tiles in particular. I guess it's fine for HQ1, you still have enough iron to get that steel mill down. And you do need some amount of that aluminum. But Gameslayer, I'm not sure I get that.
A scavenger HQ has been upgraded.
I liked the original steel mill location better. That allows Gameslayer to get this mine up on HQ2 without having to do that whole transition. But it will be fine. Gameslayer can sell out of a bunch of aluminum and get to this upgrade pretty quickly. He really should be doing that, but he missed his opportunity now. Cubit selling down a lot of aluminum, making all that money. Cubit also going into nuke plants right away. Perfectly fine to do that without the uranium this game, just because uranium started half, and power makes so much money that that doesn't necessarily hurt you early on. It is a bit dicier that Cubit doesn't have any water either, and the one nuke plant isn't really going to be doing a whole lot to clear his debt. He's going to be paying a little bit of money to keep his debt down, and that's about it. But he is already up to HQ3 just about. He should be taking it, should pick up some water, maybe some uranium, maybe not, and everything will go quickly for him. Okay, going for ice for that, always a fine choice. Would like to see a second nuclear plant, and that should all be great. Meanwhile, Gameslayer just a bit further behind, going for silicon, which seems like an odd choice. Doesn't look glass production before too long, and it might... No, there is other good silicon available, so I don't see the rush for that. I don't think Gameslayer should be looking at going into glass right now. Nuclear power is just very clearly the choice, and he has plenty of tiles that could easily move into it. So just very strange to me right now. He's also in a good position to make power money, but just not taking advantage of that, letting Cubit get all the advantage there. One thing Gameslayer is doing, at least, is stockpiling that uranium instead of selling it down, keeping the price a little bit elevated, but still not doing all that much for him. Again, uranium early on, not making that big of a difference. Which I guess goes against my emphasis on uranium on the founding phase. But we'll ignore that. That's one reason why this location might have been a nicer one for Gameslayer.
The black market is online.
Well, Cubit going into a patent lab now. Also securing that high silicon through a cave. Yeah, I guess it's slightly closer. There's no downside to that necessarily. What is Cubit going to be going for at this patent lab? Nothing queued up yet, but chems are reasonably cheap. They are rising slowly thanks to this one lab, but only slowly. Thing is, Cubit also isn't making very much money. Reactors will do some amount of that. Transparent aluminum will help him upgrade very quickly. This found let him have access to a huge amount of aluminum. And yeah, skipping that glass price will help. Although it is a bit awkward because he doesn't have quite enough carbon to support that at the same time for more than one upgrade. And he can't easily move back into it now that he has the reactors down that are his only source of money. Maybe would have liked to see him skip the silicon in that case. Gameslayer already has that one tile in silicon. If Cubit's not going to be making glass, then there's just absolutely no rush into this tile. Could easily secure more carbon or something of that sort, or just put some farms down somehow. Maybe even collect more aluminum temporarily and then transition those into farms. There were definite options, but it's okay. Meanwhile, Gameslayer's still stuck a little bit behind. Finally got that nuke plant up, doing some good work, but Cubit did end up paying through all his extra founding debt and everything else, making some power money. Which just wasn't a situation that was necessary given Gameslayer's starting location.
A robotics HQ has been upgraded.
That said, Gameslayer doing some nice things right now, such as stockpiling that water overnight, although I guess he's just stockpiling it in general.
New building is available for option.
In any case, Gameslayer will have a nice advantage late in the game from being the robotic on a series map that it almost always has very extreme life support prices. It's just a lot of potential extra money. Robots always have the nice benefit of being able to get into many markets thanks to their robot adjacency, keeping their stuff more efficient. But it's still hard to see what Gameslayer's plan is for getting back into things. He's not making a ton of money anywhere, really. His only thing that makes anything is steel. Would be nice to see him to move into food or glass. Either of those would be good options. Moving to some food now, that's nice. But either way, Cubit already HQ5, 1 HQ lead, 1 patent, that's going to be very nice. Transparent aluminum, I think, has mostly served its purpose.
Price manipulations to begin shortly.
I guess it's possible off-worlds come into play this game. Prices are pretty weak off-world. Chem's potentially useful, but we'll see how that goes. Cubit, did he? No, he let his food shortage. And that's going to be a bit painful. Cubit never managing to get any real stockpile of that. Getting some of his food frozen, and Gameslayer, meanwhile, being the robot, gets to produce a lot of surplus food with not many claims. So maybe not the best choice of shortages to start. What might have been more interesting potentially would be an oxygen short. It's much harder to interfere with. Just hard to produce oxygen in any large quantity. Cold fusion will come in handy with the liquid batteries, ice condensers doing a lot of work.
The black market is open for
And
business.
did Cubit ever secure uranium? No, so that's going to be important. I probably would have liked to see a move into some iron uranium. Like this one tile would have been fine. Just having that secured long term just
Time to start improving
erases the possibility of Gameslayer effectively hacking uranium, iron, and steel. Instead, Cubit going to have to try to dance around that.
Industrial espionage agent seeks Martian opportunities.
A spy would be very useful for Gameslayer. Gameslayer knows that Cubit won this hacker array auction. And knowing what your opponent is hacking, this can be very powerful. Otherwise you're a bit helpless to deal with it. Sometimes you can predict what they're going to be hacking, sometimes you can keep stockpiles in every resource. But still knowing in advance gives you a fair amount of power. Regardless, Gameslayer is now ahead in cash. They're even on HQ. That is one thing that Cubit has never done, move into this glass market, despite stockpiling this absurd amount of silicon. Still makes me wonder why he moved into that so early. Now he's finally getting into that glass. Not an ideal location for it. It does block off the carbon tiles if Cubit ever decided he wanted to go into an off-world. That makes it somewhat more difficult. But again, off-world's not amazing this game, and there is time for that to be a thing. Meanwhile, life support prices have crashed pretty far. So that's something somewhat different. I mean, we are still only on Sol 11. The base demand from the colony will scale up over time, and that will be one of the big factors driving prices up. But so far, I guess, with a robot and with a scavenger that's been mostly focused on life support production, hasn't been a problem. Cubit also moving into optimizations. Optimizing electronics feels odd to me. Electronics are a reasonably strong market at the moment, but there's no passive demand for electronics in any way. I guess Gameslayer does still need to put up a fair number of advanced buildings, and if we start seeing off-worlds, that's also going to be a factor. But I would not make that a priority to optimize. I don't see a reason to. Let's see, what is Gameslayer going to hack? Steel, pretty straightforward. Although, I guess Gameslayer does have plenty of steel production and plenty of steel saved up. Otherwise, I'd worry that hacking steel just raises the price of construction and transitions and whatnot. Also, Gameslayer really needs to get back in some more iron. It's really not a problem to do so. There are multiple places you can do it, just chems, under the steel even. You should not be running a -3 steel iron deficit when your iron's that cheap. Anyway, this hacker array will be very nice. Where did Cubit end up dropping that spy? He did manage to find Gameslayer's hacker array, so that's very nice. Cubit also building an off-world now, also very nice. That is one thing I neglected to mention earlier. I don't really love the nuclear plants for Cubit right now because of the lack of uranium and whatnot. He does have liquid batteries, which means that solar panels are actually somewhat viable for him. And it's even more true given that Cubit has cold fusion. He doesn't necessarily need quite that much power. There's no real good reason to drive up that uranium price for Gameslayer, I don't think. Alright, Gameslayer finally moving into 1 iron mine. That's still just not enough. He's still running a pretty severe deficit. And he's probably losing money on steel right now, once you get to the true value of steel. Alright, so that's good for Gameslayer. He knows where Cubit's off-world is, successfully dropping a slowdown strike right on top. Unfortunately, Cubit does have making machines. Launches are quite strong right now because food is so cheap. Okay, Gameslayer is not auto-selling food, that is good. But Gameslayer's still just quite far behind right now. Yeah, look at this iron-steel differential. It's not good. Gameslayer is buying into Cubit. I don't see a strong benefit to that. Cubit can pretty easily just finish defending himself. And Gameslayer is just sinking a lot of cash into this buy. That's never going to pan out. is already behind in not having the off-world, and putting his money into stock is also just weakening his hacks. Well, Gameslayer did scrap out of his hacker array, which is interesting. Not sure if he realized that Cubit had the spy down there, or something else. But moving, actually he probably won, yeah, he won the auction, that's why I didn't need that there anymore. Makes plenty of sense. One thing I did not think about earlier, Cubit mutinying this combo mine also neatly solves the iron uranium problem without having to devote that whole claim there. So that is a fair way to deal with it. Still not sure I love it, just because it's not necessarily going to be the case that you have the cooldowns to spare to continually mutiny that as much as you need to counter the hacks, but it's fine for the moment. Not sure I guess it makes sense. If Gameslayer wasn't sure whether or not the tile was defended, then the dynamite just very easily gets the job done. They cost the same as the network fires, so it's not really harming him in any meaningful way to do that instead. It does depend in part on where the dynamite lands, but it's not a huge deal regardless. Anyway, Cubit surplusing iron next. And Gameslayer hacking uranium. And at this point, it just feels like Gameslayer is just too far behind to catch up. As long as this off-world is making a pretty substantial amount of money. Although there are definite holes for Gameslayer to exploit. Right now, Cubit running a pretty substantial deficit on water because of cold fusion, and because he only does have those 2 solar condensers. It's just going to make things somewhat harder. Yes, Gameslayer does have that 1 low carbon quarry, which isn't really enough. I mean, you can't successfully run these electronics and the chems. That's one thing I think has been a bit of a problem for Gameslayer this game. Went into this triangle of electronics, went into a triangle of glass earlier. Like, his claims are not well positioned to take advantage of robot adjacency, and in a 1v1 setting, especially on something like series, prices can get so out of control that you rarely will want the full triangle. Unless, I mean, there are cases where you will want more than triangle even, but they're usually something you can predict. Gameslayer getting that whole buy into water did some amount of work, not a ton of it. I think Gameslayer either misdiagnosed where Cubit's water problems were coming from, or just neglected to keep the water price lower than the power price, something like that. Cubit still not doing anything to deal with power though. He did move back into that 3rd solar condenser, keeping that water balance healthier. But Gameslayer does definitely have that market open to him in power. He's going to continue hacking uranium. Not going to do all that much. Dynamites actually landing on the offworlds are nice, but again, Gameslayer still just quite far behind. Right, Cubit is switching his launches around effectively. Well, not all that effectively. He did eventually manage to... No, that's actually Gameslayer. That's interesting. Gameslayer has an oxygen launch queued from a mutiny. Meanwhile, Cubit continues to chain launch food. Chems are just so much better. Okay, Cubit finally switching some of these launches, but to oxygen instead of chems, not noticing the chem launch. Easy to forget about the chem launch in particular. It's one of the two, along with electronics, that sometimes get up there in value, but they're all the way down on the list. You're usually just staring at the life support prices. But yes, in a 1v1 you always have to make sure you have a very solid plan if you're going to be chain launching a resource, because that will just get out of control very quickly. I believe Cubit does have a fair amount. No, he has no food optimization, which just doesn't make any sense to me. Water optimization, sure. Works with your liquid batteries, works with your cold fusion. Oxygen does not make sense to me. I mean, I guess it was a reasonable launch for a while, but you're still making so much less oxygen than food. Just make food your launch of choice. Food was low for a long time, that's part of the equation. But again, Cubit was chain launching it. Should have expected this. But food is getting under control again, but that's mostly only because Cubit stopped launching food. He could be making more money if he planned around that all a bit better. Still just solidly in the lead. What is Gameslayer even doing? Okay, he's hacking power now. Power will be an excellent thing for him, as long as he gets that nuke plant repaired. Cubit only at the +1 power off of this solar panel. Silicon just never getting very much done for him. Again, did not need to take that claim so early. Cubit doing a good job of keeping a large stockpile of a lot of resources, but still could be doing a better job. Yes, more solar panels. I would also love to see solar panels replacing some of these reactors. Reactors not making very much money and also just making this water situation more difficult. Also, please stop auto-selling carbon. Gameslayer did not have enough carbon. Well, he has sort of enough carbon. Not enough to sustain a large amount of chem or electronics production, but we did touch on earlier how there's relatively little consumption of either of those resources. So Gameslayer probably would have been fine regardless, but still no reason to drop it down to sub $10. This Pleasure Dome, I guess, is fine. I mean, it was a pretty cheap auction, and there's not much else to do with that tile. Could be an optimization center, that would be okay, but prices are not great. Alright, Cubit moving back into aluminum is excellent. Ooh. Cubit getting the better of that shortage on uranium. That is one thing. You can't just keep hammering the same short over and over. Eventually your opponent will catch on and will exploit you. I mean, you can keep hammering the same shortage over and over, but you'd have to stay bought into that shortage. And once your opponent starts surplusing it, then that opens up room for them to interfere and everything gets a little bit silly. Anyway, Cubit should have this at any moment. Gameslayer doing some nice things, but never getting to that important off-world market. One of those series games where that just was a thing. Also, completely ignoring aluminum, that would be extremely profitable, but it was all going to be too little, too late regardless. Right, hello everyone, and welcome to game number 2 of our Group A matchup between Cubit32 and Gameslayer989. I am still Blues, and this game we have an electronics colony with a double electronics price. Going to be an important thing to take note of. Carbon is going to be a key resource for producing that electronics, but it's going to be hard to work with. You can try to drop scavenger there. I don't know where you're going to find your aluminum. This is basically most of the aluminum on the map. There are 4 more lows available somewhere. 1 there, 2 there. So you're not completely dead if you don't claim that. Alright. Cubit, going in this corner.
HQ has been founded.
It is fine. It gets decent work done. I'm not sure about Gameslayer's found. I probably would have preferred founding next to this water patch. Also get some better cliffs to work with for power. But I am mildly surprised that no one tried to make a sort of aluminum monopoly-ish thing work. I mean, it wouldn't have been that strong. Someone could just grab this pair of lows and be fine regardless. The thing about Gameslayer's found, if it's down here instead, you don't have to ship the water, and the savings from the fuel savings from not having to ship the water really outweighs anything about shipping that aluminum a bit further. Silicon also going to be a thing though. I would not be surprised to see a 1-1 split of that silicon if no one grabs both quickly. And I don't see a good reason to grab both quickly. Anyway, Cubit first into water, still making most of his money. Very standard iron steel.
The black market is online.
Upgrading just going to be slow for both players though due to the distance they're shipping that aluminum. Gameslayer getting into the reactors first is going to make a solid amount of money if Cubit doesn't stop that. Probably worth sending that power surge down there, because that will just slow down Gameslayer significantly. Instead, Cubit transitioning out of his iron into reactors, I can't say I love that move. I mean, it's not going to kill him in any way. He does have enough iron to run his mills for another 40-ish seconds. And if he's ever desperate, he can move into the iron down here. But it is not particularly strong iron. And I wish his stockpile were slightly larger or something along those lines. Like maybe instead of putting his steel mills down the triangle, maybe you just connect up that water. You get a large water stockpile, then transition your water into the reactors, something like that. Cubit will be getting to HQ3 very soon though, so that is nice for him. Gameslayer meanwhile still solidly stuck here on HQ2, not being able to afford this glass because of this nice freeze on the reactors.
New land is
Oh,
available for
Gameslayer,
auction.
what are you doing? With this 2 aluminum claims, really? I mean, look at that fuel cost. So I would have thought Gameslayer's 2 big advantages early could have been... Well, no. I guess fuel was not going to be a big advantage for him regardless because he's shipping all this carbon, shipping this water. Avoidable if he found it a little differently. But the thing is, taking those 2 aluminum tiles maybe lets him upgrade slightly faster, but also ensures that he's going to be mired in a lot of fuel debt, makes it very hard for him to make this power money, which would have been a lovely option with this dust storm coming. I mean, it's still definitely possible. 30k of debt isn't extreme, and Cubit is only just getting 1 geotherm up, so Gameslayer has some room to work with that. Gameslayer going for the 2 ends of his line, waiting until he can buy the goon to fill in the middle. Gets up the power a little sooner that way, without unnecessarily exposing himself to black market. Cubit also going to that 1 wind turbine is fine. I'd be very tempted right now as Cubit to turn off my steel mills temporarily. One, they're actually losing money in the moment. I mean, it's fine because the actual price of value of steel is higher, but it prevents Gameslayer from making quite as much on this power, although turns out Gameslayer's not going to make any real amount anyway, thanks to this mutiny, among other things. Also, food and fuel debt, again, just being too much for Gameslayer to handle. You could have just found it down here, could have gotten a huge stockpile of water, could have had more life support production, it would have been beautiful. Unfortunately. I don't understand this still. I mean, Cubit is slightly ahead in cash. He should be able to... What is all his cash in? I mean, nothing is worth very much of his. Okay. It was... I don't know. Honestly, where all his cash went. So he had 9k before, then he sank all the way down to 5k. Whatever. If Cubit can get into that glass, he'll be fine. Alright, Gameslayer moving out of reactors. I mean, I guess that makes sense. Gameslayer is not making any money on reactors because he's consuming such a stupid amount of fuel unnecessarily. He should really not have this on, especially after slant drilling, because this is just asking himself die horribly to fuel. Oh, and the game's just really deciding it wants Cubit to get that nice edge on fuel. Gameslayer putting a nice freeze down on the reactors does help, but not quite enough. I'm not sure why Gameslayer is buying quite so much silicon. I don't think either player is particularly interested in using it. Not for solar panels, not for glass quite yet. Maybe to deny Cubit from going into electronics, but there's no reason to go into electronics when reactors are so ridiculous.
The black market is online.
Alright. Gameslayer has finally turned off his aluminum, as has Cubit. And Gameslayer does have slant now, which pretty much frees him up to do something like get another quarry down here. Yeah, make this into a turbine or something, then switch that into more production. Although, Gameslayer also doesn't have enough water. And he's going to make that problem much, much worse right now. And there's no great solution to that. You can use a claim return or mules. Claim return on this tile would be pretty excellent. You can also use the second one on this aluminum. No need to have that tile ever. Never needed it in the first place, but especially true now. And I'd really do that instead of letting water go out of control. I know Cubit's reactors are very important to freeze, but yeah, not as effective a freeze as Gameslayer would have liked, thanks to that goon placement. Gameslayer at least realizing that the goon purchase was likely to go on one of these tiles, freezing here instead. It's less optimal freeze, but I think the modal value is somewhat higher. Geothermal borehole, very nice for Cubit. Well, not very nice, but it's an extra 0.2 power. You'll take it. Right, Cubit solidly ahead in cash. I don't know why Cubit transitioned out of his water. Yes, electronics are a strong market, but now you're running a water deficit. You know Gameslayer is running a water deficit. His water price is going to keep climbing. It's just not good. Okay. Well, Cubit got a bit lucky there on the timing, scrapping out of those electronics right as Gameslayer dropping out. power surge on the water. Now Gameslayer desperately needs to fix his water issue. I'm not sure I would choose this way to do it. I would probably try to get by on 2 water tiles, but I guess this is fine.
The black market is online.
But really, at some point, I do need to see Gameslayer get these 2 tiles back, because you can't be operating down 2 tiles as a scavenger against an expansive. Meanwhile, Cubit going to optimization will be very nice. A lot of options for optimization. Cubit still that 1 HQ level behind though. So going to have to figure out how he's going to get back in to things. He's now lost his major advantage in the water. In particular, doesn't have any steel prepared for his upgrade.
The engineers have advanced our
So
production.
even if he manages to defend himself, and he should, he'll still be delayed quite heavily. Also should really stop auto-selling in water at this
Market is
point.
open for business.
Gameslayer, you need power. I guess Gameslayer may be a bit offended that Cubit was deeper in debt than him for most of the game. Wanting to show Cubit how it's really done, trying to go for that D plus 8 or something. Otherwise, I don't understand why there's so much of this stuff going on. Alright, Gameslayer transitioning out of the aluminum into solar panels. I mean, that is one use for those tiles. The downside, of course, is that we have a dust storm coming, so that's not ideal, and solar panels just not very cheap. Claim returns. You're not using the black market anyway, even though there are plenty of things to use on the black market.
Our methods continue to improve.
Yep. I wish I understood some of these decisions. Alright, going into chems instead of power. I mean, chems are fine. They'll make good money, but I guess Gameslayer just needs to kill Cubit now, so maybe it's fine. But I don't think he's gonna make enough money. Cubit already in the chems, in those electronics, he should be fine. That defense is going to happen just now. Alright, Gameslayer noticing that, getting into the power finally. Not before getting into D-debt. Alright. Fixing that right before the debt tick. So, that's something. But Gameslayer, their claim returns. Don't do this to yourself. Alright, Cubit, again, it's the situation we talked about before, managed to defend himself, but still solidly stuck on HQ4. I mean, he's still an expansive, he still has fewer wasted claims than Gameslayer because there wasn't this nonsense. Also, there wasn't this. Gameslayer probably should not have taken both silicon tiles. I mean, maybe it's okay. But it feels somewhat unnecessary, especially when he's already wasting so many claims. Cubit did have that edge in the optimizations. Gameslayer, going into an optimization center himself though, should be catching up before too long on that. And the thing is, some of Cubit's existing optimizations are somewhat wasted, not tremendously wasted, on things like water. Water just never going to be an issue this game again, thanks to Gameslayer with his triple pump. Although it does make sure that Cubit only has to have the 2 water tiles down. Pleasure Tome will be a very nice tile with a scavenger and an expansive. What is hacker array? All the way out there with dynamites. Okay, sure. You do you, Cubit. 229 on the Pleasure Dome, very nice. Would like to see a virtual reality pickup. That might just be what Cubit is going for with his patent lab. And now he's not going for the patent lab, so I guess not. Still plenty of nice things to pick up from the patent lab. Picking machines might be relevant at some point. Chems are a solid launch. Oxygen is a solid launch. Chems will probably be the long-term launch. What else? Nanotech, always useful. Carbon scrubbing, probably nice.
The hacker array is finished. Time to change our passwords.
I mean, Cubit does have a solid stock of carbon.
Continue to improve. The black market is online.
What else could be useful for Cubit? Teleportation? He is shipping a decent amount. Anyway, I would have liked to see the VR pickup. That's just a solid $120 there. Alright, Gameslayer is trying to make this a short game. That is what he needs to do, especially since he continues to refuse to actually use his claims with any sort of efficiency. Might be nice to see some sort of teleportation or something if he's going to insist on keeping these claims out here for God knows what reason. But again, Gameslayer just very married to the idea of a short game, making sure to raise his debt very high to make sure the game doesn't last very long. But Cubit is in a position to make sure this game goes long, just needs to buy into Gameslayer, doing that now. Going to be making plenty of money very soon off of this steel. Cubit making sure to boost steel to insane prices by just not producing it for the longest time and then upgrading to HQ5 without a stockpile. It's just fine. Gameslayer has no way to deal with that. And a game that Gameslayer, I think, had some amount of edge in for a while has started falling apart for him. Just ignoring power for too long, letting himself get into an absurd amount of debt, wasting all these claims, and now he's just behind on optimizations, way behind on claims since he's against the expansive, and there's very little he can do. Slant drilling was a nice pickup for him, but unfortunately just not going to be getting much done anymore. Other nice thing for Gameslayer, he does have control, well, he did have control of silicon. Cubit eventually picking up that one low. And Cubit also surplusing silicon now and then. Interesting. Gameslayer crashing out carbon and then buying back in. Cubit is just going to get a nice boost off of that, as long as he sells out first. Really? Oh, there's a natural shortage and the hack. So that's just interesting. Gameslayer buying further into carbon, further increasing the... Yep. Cubit gets almost all the benefit out of that. And just further and further in the lead. Gameslayer up to D+5. Maybe Gameslayer will actually get what he wants out of this game. It's hard to see what his goal was with some of his plays, unless it was just to build up an absurd amount of debt. And from this point, Cubit should pretty easily clean things up. His target is just a full 100k lower. If we get to the next debt tick, Gameslayer, what? He's going to take a 42% debt tick on 360k? So like a nice solid 150k of debt. You know, $7.50 off his stock price. Cubit hacking away at steel. Nothing Gameslayer can do about that. Ooh, Gameslayer moving out of water for too long. And, you know, since he is just very nicely in that D+6, can't react to this double mutiny at all. Nice play by Cubit. And just everything auto off. You know something has gone horribly wrong when your base looks like this. Anyway, well done by Cubit. Taking this series of games 2-0. How good is the series indeed? Well, yeah. Mars was Ceres, Ceres was Mars. Gameslayer both games just trying to make the hacking work and ignoring most other aspects of the long game. He did go into some optimizations this game, but claim returns. Claim returns, claim returns.